Bonjour, bienvenue, welcome. Bienvenue à la conférence publique du Prix international de la recherche en santé Henry G. Friesen. My name is Nathalie Desrosiers. I'm the principal of Massey College, where the Friends of CIHR and the Friesen Prize program are located. So it's really a pleasure for me to be here because I was the Dean of the Faculty of Law, Common Law at University of Ottawa for many years. So it's a real pleasure for me to be back on the grounds of University of Ottawa. As you know, University of Ottawa and the City of Ottawa are located on Algonquin territory, and it's our first order of the day to acknowledge the lands on which we are going to meet and work, and acknowledge as well all the traditional knowledge keepers, young and new. So today I'm replacing Paul Kennedy, who used to be the one. So pretty big shoes to fill, I have to say. And my role here is simply to allow the proceedings to continue and be rigid on time limits so that everybody gets to do their part. Je veux vraiment vous remercier d'être ici. C'est très important d'avoir une audience comme ça. C'est un prix fabuleux et puis on est très, très heureux de vous avoir ici parmi nous. As in the past, the public forum lecture is video recorded for future broadcasts online on the Friends of CIHR website, so you can actually go back and review it again if you so wish. So it's now my pleasure to invite Dr. Jocelyn Côté à venir présenter Un monde bienvenu de la part de l'Université d'Ottawa.
Merci Nathalie. Bonjour chers invités, messieurs, mesdames. Au nom de la communauté de la Faculté de médecine et aussi de l'Université d'Ottawa, je vous souhaite donc la bienvenue au pavillon Roger Guindon, qui héberge un groupe exceptionnel de chercheurs en santé dans toutes les différentes sphères globales de la recherche en santé. The University of Ottawa's partnership with Friends of CIHR goes back many years, and it's an honor for the university to continue this long-standing collaboration. We'd like to thank Dr. Obiangel, its president, for the time he has devoted year after year to ensure the success of the Henry Friesen International Prize in Health Research. I would also like to warmly welcome Dr. Henry Friesen, after whom this award is named. We are honored that you are with us today, and that you have been unfailing in attending this event year after year. So the university is really proud to host this event, this Henry Friesen Award recipient lecture, and we feel that this gives our students really tremendous opportunity to hear from such eminent scientists, which often will turn up and inspiring them and fuel their passion for discovery in their future as young researchers. So finally, I would like to take this opportunity to congratulate on the behalf of the faculty of the university, Professor Bartha Knoppers on winning this year's Henry Friesen International Prize in Health Research. And without further ado, I'll pass
Merci, Dr. Côté. I'd like to invite now Dr. Obiangel, who is the president of Friends of CIHR and the Friesen Prize program, for his introductory remarks.
Merci, Madame Desrosiers. C'est un grand plaisir d'être ici à l'Université d'Ottawa et de participer dans le forum public Prix Friesen 2019. It's a great pleasure to be here at the University of Ottawa and once again to participate at this public forum lecture and celebrate the 2019 Friesen Prize program and honor Professor Bartha Knoppers, this year's laureate. The Friesen Prize and related events today are organized by Friends of CIHR, which is a national organization focused on the support of science and society. We advocate on behalf of young people as career scientists and encourage the funding of health research in Canada. We are supportive of the goals and ideals of CIHR and eager to recruit young people to our activities across the country. The image on the screen reflects this in our recruitment brochure. This year, we are honoring Professor Bartha Knoppers, the 14th Henry G. Friesen international prize winner, who was selected for her exceptional contributions to the study of legal and ethical issues related to human genetics and genomics. She will be formally introduced by Dr. Henry Friesen, in whose name this prize was established. We are delighted that Dr. Friesen is here today and will be actively involved in the program, as he has since the prize was established in 2005. Friends of CIHR has had a productive year, and through a number of activities of the Friesen laureates, all of which have furthered our mission, as shown in this slide. And in this slide, we list some of these. Beginning in November 2018, Dr. David Naylor, who was last year's 2018 Friesen Prize winner, who's in our audience this afternoon, was last year's winner and undertook a series of institutional visits and was hosted by 5 faculties of medicine across the country and engaged senior leaders, students, and policy people. In March of this year, Friends of CIHR, in collaboration with Massey College at the University of Toronto, hosted its inaugural Janet Ressant Lecture to honor Dr. Ressant's major contributions in developmental biology and to her commitment to the development of young scientists. Dr. Laurie West, professor of pediatrics at the University of Alberta, was the inaugural awardee. About 5 years ago, we expanded the scope of the Friesen Prize program by adding science policy roundtables to draw attention to the important issues of the day and, more specifically, address the challenges faced by young trainees and early career scientists. We have published proceedings of science policy roundtables, as shown in this slide, and they are on our website for reference, so you can read them at your leisure. Now, this year's roundtable will take place tomorrow morning at 8:30 a.m. here at the Pavillon Roger Guindon, and I invite you all to attend. The topic is important and top of mind. The title is Impacts of Disruptive New Technologies on Society, Role of the Academy. And Dr. Eric Meslin, President of the Canadian Council of Academies, and Dr. Colleen Flood, Director of University of Ottawa Centre for Health Law, Policy and Ethics, are co-chairs. Should be very exciting. Today we celebrate the 2019 Friesen Prize awardee. We are particularly grateful to Professor Bartha Knoppers for accepting the obligations inherent in the 2019 Friesen Prize obligations. In addition to today's public forum lecture, Professor Knoppers will undertake a national tour over the next 6 months and visit major institutions across the country. Like past laureates, she will meet academic leaders, senior scientists, and most importantly, young researchers in training, which she enjoys. We are privileged to have her here in Ottawa on this occasion. Now, Dr. Knoppers' lecture is recorded, transcribed, and published in the Friesen Lecture Series, and will appear in Book 7 of the Friesen Lectures. Here is this most recent publication, Book 6, featuring Dr. Alan Bernstein and Dr. David Naylor, who graced this auditorium last year and the year before. Copies of these are available for free up at the deck, so please avail yourself of this. Now, none of this can happen without the support of our major sponsors who underwrite everything that we can do. And I put the slide up just to acknowledge principal sponsors and thank them for their financial assistance, moral support, and local support when we visit across the country. And featured, of course, is the University of Ottawa, which has been our partner in this, at least for the past 5 years, and we truly appreciate the support, Dr. Koke. Thank you very much. This lists all the important universities that have undertaken the commitment. We'd like to expand this, but there's a limit to what our Friesen Prizers can do in the number of places they can visit. So that's their only limitation part. Otherwise, you'd be at 16 places in the country. In any event.
Informed consent.
For sure. Finally, I'd like to acknowledge Christina Castelvi, my assistant, and the administrative assistant for Friends of CIHR and the Friesen Prize for all her assistance and help in making sure that this materializes. So thank you very much.
And now it's my very great honor to welcome to the podium Dr. Friesen to introduce our prize winner. Dr. Friesen demands no introduction in this crowd, but I will do that anyway because we really want to acknowledge your presence, your continued support, and really having you here means a lot to the future of research in Canada. I think he is well known as being the person who inspired the creation of the CIHR. He was a visionary medical scientist, very renowned, and I think we're so delighted that you are here. I think in 2005, when Friends of CIHR bestowed upon him the Distinguished Service Award and established this prize, they wanted to acknowledge how much he had contributed to Canada. Welcome to University of Ottawa. Thank you.
Thank you for those kind words. It's always a great pleasure to come back to the University of Ottawa to share in this important event for those of us involved in health and medical research. It is, of course, not only coming here, but it is coming here at a time, particularly in the phase when Alan Rock was president. And of course, without Alan Rock's unflinching support for the idea and the development of CIHR, it simply wouldn't have happened. So I don't know if he's here today, but we all collectively owe him and the Christian government a great deal for taking this bold, daring initiative. As they did a few years later, with the creation of Genome Canada, and Bartha Knoppers was one of the lead members of the group of 4 or 5 who championed the idea that Canada, if it was to play its rightful role in science in this area, really had to step up to the plate and take it up a few notches, and she was insistent, along with others, to make it happen, and so we owe to her and her colleagues a great deal of thanks that Canada today is, in fact, thanks to Genome Canada, thanks to her earlier efforts, a real world leader in selected areas of genomics. Third point I'd like to say is directed at Abby Angel for spearheading Friends of CIHR, taking it in a path that few would have imagined at the outset, but today we're grateful that you have guided it along with your colleagues on the board and really have enriched the Canadian discussion on science and scientific opportunities by bringing to this country outstanding individuals with vision, with insight, who themselves have shown leadership, and it's in that spirit that we have today Bartha Knoppers as the latest recipient of the prize. She's also quite distinguished in among the scientific leaders that have been recognized. She's the first social scientist to be so recognized. Perhaps it's a further expression of the full development of CIHR, which was to see the full embrace of all aspects of health research, including, of course, the ethical considerations. Let me read for you and with you a few of the highlights of Bartha's absolutely outstanding, brilliant career. As I said last night, she's not only a national treasure, an icon, she's a global icon in the ethics field. Tongue-in-cheek partly, Canada has in tennis, Bianca. The Americans have Serena. but in the ethical field, we have Bartha, ranked number 1. And she has continued to inspire and provide leadership that has provided a record of accomplishment and achievement for Canada and for the field. What impresses me as I read and studied, and I've worked somewhat with her on occasion, but really was unaware of extraordinary breadth and range of interests that she has directed her very considerable intellectual prowess to. Human gene editing, biobanking, global data sharing, research policy, stem cell research, the interface of ethics and law. Now, her background is a person born to first-generation immigrants who instilled in her values and a direction and inspired her to continue her studies, and eventually that led to studies at McMaster and University of Toronto and McGill, but her PhD was taken at the Sorbonne in France. She is a scholar of unrivaled productivity, has made tremendous contributions at a national, international level. When we look at the array of organizations that she was part of, either as chair, co-chair, or key member of, the list goes on, and they're described by code words that only the insiders would understand fully: HAP maps and genomes and IRC, P4, cartogene, you name it. It's something like out of Star Wars. But she has founded in Canada a public population project in genomics and science, Cartogene, Quebec's National Biobank. She was chair of the Ethics and Policy Committee of the International Cancer Genome Consortium, member of European Union's Governance Bank for Biobank Standardization, the Global Alliance for Genomics and Health, and astonishingly wonder how she finds time to do all of these things, but author of 38 books, 465 articles, over 100 book chapters. Predictably, she has been the recipient of many, many honors: Order of Canada, Officer of the Order of Quebec, Commander of the Order of Montreal. An amazing individual that we as Canadians take great pride in recognizing as one of our own.
A center, a team, a project, be it local, be it national, international. And it's been my pleasure to always work with other people. And I've been asked also to slightly personalize what I'm about to describe to you to make it more real. So I'm not used to talking about myself, but from time to time, you'll see why I've divided my presentation into 4 different parts. I'd like to start mainly by thanking Dr. Henry Friesen, who I had the honor to work with at the time when he was at the MRC, and then already then the MRC was providing ethics guidance to Canadian researchers. But he was more than a leader. He was also someone who really inspired. I mean, there was no idea you could not present to Henry and he wouldn't get excited about it or give you some wise counsel. And his vision, his leadership were key in the establishment of Genome Canada. And I think the work of Genome Canada and CIHR stands as a model for the world. And the whole idea of institutional stewardship, I think, is extremely important. So this Friesen lecture addresses the prohibition reflex that responds to scientific breakthroughs and the possible social impact by saying, and you've got about 15 seconds when someone puts a mic in your face, there should be a law against it. So I'm going to draw on 4 decades of my involvement in emerging technologies and policymaking and try to decipher the lessons learned here, but the stage is necessarily international. So in this retrospective perspective, I've divided it from 1978 onwards and chosen 4 iconic, emblematic events. Louise Brown, the first test tube baby, Dolly, the cloned sheep, the human sequence map, and the recent CRISPR babies in China, followed by a short conclusion on AI and big data. And hopefully, by going through this trajectory, past, current, and future, I hope to illustrate the need for a new approach from the usual trajectory of or ethical principles limited to autonomy, justice, and privacy, and argue that we have to internationally start taking a human rights focus. So Louise Brown, in 1978, I'd finished my doctoral coursework in comparative medical at La Sorbonne in Paris. And with the advent of in vitro fertilization, I went to Cambridge in the UK. And I was supposed to examine, and I did, the implications for the duties of physicians and researchers of in vitro fertilization. There I was fortunate enough to meet both Steptoe and Edwards, Dr. Steptoe and Edwards. And fortunate in the sense that I was amazed at how frank and honest they were with me as a doctoral student. And also for the time, the kindness they showed me. And I vowed at that time that in all my teaching career, I would forever be open and kind with students. They provided a model, and at the same time, not only as professors, but how to handle the mediatic furor and the stresses that come by being an inventor or providing a scientific breakthrough. They were accused of creating designer babies, playing God, slippery slope, unnatural, and so on. Yet if you look at IVF between in vitro fertilization between July 1978 and July 2008, 8 million healthy IVF babies had been born around the world. That's just in a 30-year period. And if you look at the statistics here in Canada with respect to infertility, unbeknownst to most, infertility in women stands at 15%. So this is a medical issue. It is not a cosmetic one. Now, the United Kingdom, talking about pragmatic, is exemplary in its approaches to emerging technologies. They adopted the Human Fertilization and Embryology Act in 1990. They created a Human Fertilization and Embryology Authority to monitor and approve developments. So they had an agency where you could go if you had a breakthrough in technology to get approved. And they were the first country, if not the only country in the world, to adopt a Congenital Disability Civil Liability Act in 1976, which prohibited children from suing their mothers for injuries suffered in utero, except where it was a motor vehicle accident where they would be covered under no fault. So it's a world first, the idea that children cannot claim once born that their mother's behavior led to their condition. They also adopted the Vaccine Damages Payment Act in the sort of public health sphere for rare cases of lethal or serious reactions to vaccines in children. So the state would compensate that child who, on behalf of a larger community, had this untoward outcome. In short, the UK was a model for scientific validation, oversight, reproductive choice, protection of the vulnerable, and compensation mechanisms, a real true regulatory ecosystem. So I was finishing my doctorate and had 1 or 2 children and began to apply to be a law professor. And this is really what my first big shock. I was told by the dean at a university I will not name that I should not become a professor but go to the law firms. I was dabbling in science and soft law, he stated. You will never be a scholar. even in 1985, at that time, I thought legal research was about deciphering what could be interpretations and illuminating the limitations of what we call positive law and inventing or anticipating the need for new ethical or legal norms, not in applying out-of-date, hard positive law. For me, the excitement lay in finding new interpretations that would allow the law to be a tool for social reform and the framing of future science. Irrespective, I did become a professor of law in Université de Montréal in 1985, where I was for 23 years. But it wasn't very late after that I was hauled into the world of the Canadian Royal Commission on Reproductive Technologies. You would have thought that as a preacher's kid, I would be well prepared for the often nitty-gritty side of debates about values and how these values and principles could frame the future of society. The debates were incredible. We had public hearings in 17 cities and had to oversee 15 volumes of research, all the while handling the unholy alliance of anti-tech, feminist, and religious ideologies, all arguing against these technologies. It was quite a group. The hearings were tense. Every applicant was given the same amount of time to speak. And we also had private sessions for women afraid to be seen by the religious community or their husbands as desiring access to such technologies. Security was tight, the hounding of the press was relentless, and our personal mail was checked by the RCMP after many commissioners received hate mail. I've been burned in hell many times. Adding to the difficulties of the commission coming to conclusions and political matters was the fact that Canada at the federal level has very few federal tools other than the Tax Act, which we all know about, or patents and so on. But it's criminal powers really that allows it, if you like, to intervene in some of the areas that we're going to look at today. And this really shaped the final conclusions of our report. And it did contain a comprehensive scheme of criminal prohibition as well as regulations and a federal agency and other civil rights of citizens. But it took 10 more years after the Commission's report for a law to be passed, the Assisted Human Reproduction Act of 2004. Well, it immediately came under attack for overreach by the province of Quebec. And I worked with the Quebec lawyers on the successful challenge of the act, saying that the Quebec Civil Code already had covered or occupied the field, if you like, in health, civil law, privacy issues, consent, and so on, and so that those parts of the law were struck down. So this first decade, what did I learn? Well, I think I learned about compromise and compassion, particularly in those private sessions of the Royal Commission. The complexity of policymaking when personal values or sometimes even ideologies are trumpeted or disguised as individual rights, often focusing solely on humans as individuals, not as members of Canadian society, a society that wishes to have a health system that is comprehensive, universal, portable, and accessible, equitable. So those are the lessons of the first decade. The second decade, however, was not long in coming. The birth of Dolly the sheep in 1996 marked a significant scientific breakthrough. And this pivotal moment was then followed by UNESCO's 1997, that Dr. Friesen mentioned, a Universal Declaration on the Human Genome and Human Rights. The International Bioethics Committee was dynamic. We had artists on there. We had nutritionists. It was theologians, sociologists, legal scholars, and so on. And I was a member of the committee, but also the legal one, where we would try to bring together Sino-Russian, Islamic, Judaic, civil, and common law systems so that the language of the declaration would resonate in other countries and they could interpret it locally in their country because it was something that they could see apply to them. The Declaration also stressed the need for scientific accuracy and emphasized the evolving, mutating nature of the human genome. We really tried to make a point is the human genome is not static. It is not a code that you are stuck with. We also tried to anticipate issues such as discrimination, commercialization, and so on. But my particular interest was introducing a legal notion that the human genome at the level of the species, not your individual genome, but the human genome as opposed to the animal, plant, and so on, should be considered part of the common heritage of humankind. This notion dates back to the 17th century with Hugo Grotius, who's here, and founds the international law of the sea and of space. It has very well-defined legal characteristics: peaceful use, open access, respect for the rights of others, and administration for the common good. And as I'm standing here, I'm thinking, if I was a climate change person, this is exactly what I would hook onto to make sure we had a truly international solution. This concept was also introduced in work I did for the Law Reform Commission of Canada entitled Human Dignity and Genetic Heritage. But it didn't make it through quite the way we wanted to in the Universal Declaration. The IBC, International Bioethics Committee, was followed by a governmental commission who then went through our declaration and changed some of it. And debate went around, remember the many countries there, did common mean socialist or shared? Did heritage have property connotations of ownership and so on? And that's why in the final version, it read as follows, talking about the human genome. In a symbolic sense, comma, it is the heritage of humanity. Another thing is we wanted to keep the declaration technology free, because as soon as you mention one scientific breakthrough technology, it's as though the declaration does not or could not or will not apply to other technologies. But the birth of DALI came just as we were finishing our work, and the commission, the governmental commission, added an article stating, practices that are contrary to human dignity, such as reproductive cloning of human beings, shall not be permitted. So we had DALI that led to this at the same time. And oh, by the way, DALI is the way to go through customs. If people ask you what you're doing, don't say biotechnology, ethics, and law, just say DALI, or say this. Say aliens, and you'd be surprised. Customs agents actually can connect to these terms. And the claim by the Raelians, who were in Quebec, I've never found this spaceship or where they are, but they said that they were going to clone a human being. Well, this spurred many countries into action and saying, this declaration from UNESCO is not sufficient. We need a treaty. We need a binding international treaty with sanctions and signing and ratification and so on and so on. And everyone thought, this is one thing everyone can agree on. There will be no reproductive cloning of human beings. So we thought everyone would agree. And if they kept it down to that sentence, it might have worked. What happened, though, is that individual countries started wanting to add in their, political favorite or their influence, and began to lobby for the inclusion of other restrictions, such as on human embryo research, and that was the United States. And the consensus fell apart because it would have affected the legality of human embryo research in many countries, and also IVF, and so on. So there was a very acrimonious debate. It's really a downer, if I can use that word, to be and see this kind of lobbying and shifting and alliances that then serve for future use and so on. And the treaty was not adopted. It was watered down to a declaration. 84 UN members voting in favor, 34 voting against, including Canada, and 37 abstaining. And the language itself at the end was more aspirational than it was affirmative of either principles or dictatorial in terms of potential sanctions. So I think what I learned, and we learn, is the policy doesn't grow on trees. It's not something you can write up or dream about. Well, you can dream about it, but you can't. It takes work, it takes consensus, it takes trust, it takes a mind frame favorable to seeking consensus. And in short, the I, personal values, is subsumed in a process of what is best for society, reflecting both the common good and what is achievable. Now, this next decade is not one breakthrough. The whole decade was a breakthrough, and that was the mapping of the human genome. An international consortium of scientists and national funding agencies. They had as their principle something that's increasingly spoken about today: openly accessible, open science. And every 24 hours, they would download sequences into the public domain. And no sooner had this noble effort begun, very exciting, than Celera, a private company run by Greg Ventnor, undertook the same mapping effort, but in the commercial sector, so as to be able to put patents and so on eventual products, devices, drugs, and the like. Now, in spite of this, what's called the gene war, the public versus private mapping war, the first draft of the Human Genome Project was published in 2001 with Tony Blair and Bill Clinton, together with Francis Collins, joining each other at the White House for this declaration. It was really, really exciting. And this collaborative approach led also, as Dr. Friesen mentioned, to an effort to put a percentage on what was called ELSI, ethical, legal, social issues, in all the grants and studies that surrounded this mapping effort. And it's the first time that there was a sort of a dedicated sum for research on the social, ethical, and legal issues. But as soon as the map came out, within 24 hours, there were phone calls and television programs on how mapping and understanding human genetics would enable eugenics, because we would understand how genes work so we could manipulate them more. So there was a lot of debate, and I have to say that between Star Trek episodes and Gattaca, there was no shortage of material for teaching. I mean, you could just use a lot of those episodes and so on, and for discussion and teaching purposes. So as Dr. Friesen mentioned, the Human Genome Organization created an international ethics committees. We put out statements of actual research and even what we thought would be future research to frame the international effort. And again, this is a self-regulatory. This is not a royal commission or a law of a country. It's actually scientists getting together and saying, what are we going to do about this? And where are we going? Why? And how do we prepare for a responsible approach? Now, there's no doubt, however, that the one issue, if you talk to taxi drivers, which I do, you say genome and or genetic tests, they will talk about insurance. So insurance and access, especially to life and disability insurance in countries that have health insurance, such as Canada or in Europe, or even in countries that don't and need health insurance, is the #1 issue. Now, Belgium was the first country to introduce a law or a section in their civil code prohibiting insurers from asking for genetic testing or for the results of genetic testing if it had already taken place. Interesting, the day after the law, or while it was being discussed, citizens came in front of Parliament protesting because their condition, not having been labeled genetic, was not protected from insurers asking questions or not asking questions. Never would have thought. Now, this map that you see in front of you on genetic discrimination 48 countries have either human rights codes or statutes concerning genetic discrimination. And the author of this map and the text and the survey of all the countries is sitting right here, and that's Professor Jan Joly from McGill. So this is an ongoing mapping effort. And those of you in Ottawa probably know that in 2019, Canada itself adopted the Genetic Anti-Discrimination Act with criminal sanctions. But again, it is subject to constitutional challenge. I'm not involved in that one. So I also am, however, and will continue to argue against genetic-specific legislation. I think it's reductionist. It reduces the person to their genes. It ignores the influence of environment, of epigenetic factors, of socioeconomic conditions, and so on. And what might have been a route that was suggested at one time to the Ontario Law Reform Commission is take that long list. You shall not discriminate based on age, sex, gender, ancestry, mental and physical disabilities. Just simply add that it is also prohibited to regard or treat persons as such, because that's what genetic information does. It sort of puts into the mind of the person that you're already ill or you're going to get there, you're predestined to get there. And by being regarded or treated as such, you actually expand the mental, physical disabilities, age, gender, ancestry prohibitions without singling out genetics as being the source and stigmatizing, if you like, further stigmatizing genetic information. Now, there were other projects going on at that time, including the Human Diversity project, which I won't go into. It sought to understand how disappearing cultures and languages, how you could trace the link between genetics and linguistics, since speech travels where the person goes. And the project was not funded, and a lot of debate about why don't you feed people rather than let them disappear, and comments like that. It took the HAP map, as Dr. Friesen mentioned, and the 1,000 genomes map, both of them in the public domain, to finally trace that necessary understanding of the health impact of population origins and population drift over time. And in working on those two projects, what was interesting is you go to the African continent or to the Asian continents where they see NIH researchers coming and they think about that they're going to get drugs or they're going to get devices or they're going to get products, and you're supposed to not keep giving those things when the trial is over, according to Helsinki. But this is epidemiological research. It's infrastructure research. And so how do you give back then to the communities to thank them for participating? Because benefit sharing was important to them. And so they said, write us a letter. Say thank you. The space that you rent to take our blood samples or fill in questionnaires, buy it, and make it a community center and so on. It was very informative from a medical, anthropological, and cultural point of view, how different strategies can work, and also how altruistic citizens around the world are. There was nothing personal that they could get from participating in these projects. But even more exciting at that time back at home was the initiative of Henry Friesen, Tom Hudson, Martin Godbout, Lap Chi, Marc Lepage, and myself, asking the Canadian government to please take this new map and run with it. And the unique Canadian approach was, let's not just do the human genome, let's do the plant genome, the animal genomes, let's go across all genomes and be the only program in the world to have this kind of approach. And that was the basis for the content of the three funding agencies in particular. It was the MRC. We'd been meeting in airports and sort of giving up hope for getting funding from the government, and it was the MRC in the end that got us kick-started, thanks to Henry Friesen. So here is a photo of Henry Friesen when he became Companion of the Order of Canada. At the same time, I became an Officer of the Order of Canada, and it was an occasion I don't think I'll ever forget. Now, there were this idea of maps and diversity and so on took other forms as well at that time, including the creation of the Public Population Project in Genomics and Society. Say, okay, if we're going to study populations, we need to sort of ask the same questions, use the same codes, measure the same way, because if you ask people to measure their waste, they'll probably do it up here because they don't want to do it down here. And so self-reported data is obviously not scientific enough. So how then can we internationally, if UK Biobank was being talked about, Japan was talking, Estonia was creating a population, how can we prospectively harmonize so that in the future biobanks will be interoperable and we could get statistical significance much quicker? And you'll note there's the HapMap, which I talked about already, but also Cartogene, which was Canada's first population biobank, created not by me, but by Dr. Claude Laberge, who's sitting right there. And this first longitudinal cohort then led to another 5 cohorts in Canada. And today, Canada's Canadian Partnership for Tomorrow project has 330,000 participants that are interoperable and harmonized, and between 57 and 63% harmonizable and interoperable with the other population banks. So this is an incredible resource. It wasn't easy. Cartogene itself faced approval hurdles. Top population genetics, sounds like eugenics. 15 ethics committees had to approve, 15. That was a decree from the Ministry of Quebec, and I could go on and on. So out of the 3-year grant where you have to spend everything before March 31st, it actually took 18 months before we even started recruiting the 20,000. So like the Royal Commission, the local effort was more of a struggle than the international ones. So what did we learn from this decade? Well, there wasn't so much a prohibition reflex with the mapping other than the genetic discrimination, and more an appreciation of self-regulatory ethics guidance statements from professional societies, pressures from funders on applicants and so on. And so I think it was a pretty proportionate and reasonable decade in terms of how all the efforts turned out. Well, that didn't last, because the next one, of course, hit us with quite a bang. There had been some attempts to do gene therapy, somatic gene therapy, early in the 1990s, but the death of a participant, Jesse Gelsinger, during a somatic therapy gene trial in 1999 led to a halt on these trials. The same kind of reflex that happens when friendly hackers, my IT geek guys, say, you know, I can always find someone in one of your big databases, even if you say you've anonymized them, because I can do this and that. I can find a sample or data on another website. I can put it together with Utah Mormon this, and I can. When you have those situations, those singular situations, but that wake up the media and public policymakers, they start putting data and stuff back behind bars and stopping somatic gene therapies as well. But it was and don't forget, CRISPR runs through everything, huh? all the genomes. It was in 2015 that CRISPR really became known to most individuals. And scientists at that time were creating a gene drive that could eliminate pests or make mosquitoes that wouldn't be able to transport or let's say the Zika virus and so on. And they started also playing, modifying or editing non-viable human embryos. And hence, this was thought to be fantastic. It was accessible, it was affordable, could be universally available in any country. It could be used to create tissue-based treatments for cancer, repair conditions, and one day perhaps alter the human germline. Well, this technique, however, did attract incredible attention, especially there should be a law against it, REFLEX, when a Chinese scientist announced that he had the 2 babies who had been born, whose embryos had been altered so as to induce HIV resistance. And it's been an incredible journey ever since, because it wasn't as though there wasn't a law against it. If you look at this map, again, a map from our Center of Genomics and Policy, you will see that we looked at prenatal, pre-implantation, embryo research, and so on, and research cloning. But the one on germline, the reds everywhere mean restrictive. And permissive did not mean green light. It meant that there was an agency or some sort of controls, but there was research going on embryos up to the age of 14 days, and those embryos were never implanted. Since 2015, since that announcement, 61 ethics reports and statements from more than 50 countries have pronounced on germline modification. And only 11% of them are open to the possibility of allowing clinical applications. Here in Canada, the Assisted Human Reproduction Act of 2004, the one I talked about 20 minutes ago, actually does not allow the creation of embryos for research, or, to quote, any knowingly altering the genome of a cell of a human being or in vitro, such that the alteration is capable of being transmitted to descendants. So what was missing then aren't laws or guidance. What's missing was enforcement. And that applied to China as well, who immediately started putting in enforcement mechanisms. Now, the WHO has created an expert advisory committee on ethics and governance due to report next year, and the academies have created an international commission to look at what would be the conditions for germline editing if one day the clinical applications were safe and effective. So that brings me to the last decade, which will be my conclusion. And that has to do with big data and AI, where you don't see yet as much the prohibition reflex. You do, however, and I don't think it's hard for anyone to understand that the effect of big data on the future of health research is going to be enormous. You need large data sets. It allows you to stratify. It allows you to do resource allocation. It allows you to get the right drug to the right patient with the right physician having the right diagnosis, and so on. Now, the Global Alliance for Genomics and Health estimates that by 2030, so let's say 10 years from now, 83 million rare disease genomes will have been sequenced for diagnosis in 10 years. And 248 million genomes will have been sequenced for cancer diagnosis. That is a lot of data. And this whole genome data is only a small tributary feeding into big data with economic data, social data, linkage data to medical records, and so on. So in May 2018 in Montreal, the G7 had a research summit on the digital future. And they emphasized that such innovations in big data should, I quote, respect principles of public good and human welfare. And it said we need a shift in this new digital life, in this new digital world, with new ethical frameworks. I'm not so sure if we need new ethical frameworks, but we might need new interpretations of what transparency means, accountability means, reproducibility means, and so on. And how do we create a human-centric AI? You know, people are sort of afraid of the machine running away beyond and above us. Well, the Global Alliance, that was the increase of data, rare disease, cancer combined, and so on. You can see the figures are there. They speak for themselves. Well, the Global Alliance for Genomics and Health, which is a loosely knit volunteer community around the world of scientists wanting to share data. They want to share data. They want to create the tools to share it, the standards to make it interoperable, and to speed up, if you like, our understanding of health, and create sort of a genome commons. In healthcare, there are very particular concerns about reliability, safety, privacy, security, transparency, accountability, and so on. And I don't think Cambridge Analytica and other scandals have helped. But the biggest deficit we have right now is the one you can see on this slide, is that as of today, if you go to a population genome reference map, 81% of the individuals whose genomes have contributed are Caucasian. So how can you, in a country such as Canada, which has a great number of ethnic communities, have a healthcare system where the data is not representative of a modern heterogeneous population? And so the whole goal of the Global Alliance then is to foster, facilitate, and improve data sharing. Then, again, do we need to do, perhaps, I'm, as you know, against genetic laws, but the UK has created a crime of genetic re-identification. So they're saying it is a crime to intentionally or maliciously attempt to re-identify an individual through their DNA. And maybe that keeps the friendly hacker, so-called, at bay. Maybe that will calm down the privacy, security debate. I don't know. But the fear of creating a surveillance society on the one hand and making sure that there is ethical behavior on the other, perhaps would be the one instance where such a law could be argued for. So in the medical context, what we do need to do is to think about how will this affect the physician-patient relationship. Is the physician going to be surpassed by machine readable technologies that on their own will make a diagnosis? How can big data serve as a clinical support tool? Is every algorithm going to become a medical device? And so on and so on. These are the questions that Health Canada actually and medical societies are looking at. So we need to reimagine the core tenets of professional ethics. Now, the funders have a role to play in this in terms of saying you must share your data. The journals are beginning to say, AI or no AI, we need to know how you got to your conclusions using peer review as a way of controlling the use of artificial intelligence in health and in science. So I'd like to conclude then, if we are going to think about systemic approaches to the use of big data, the AI that is human-centric, we need to have anticipatory oversight. Doesn't mean more bureaucratic layers. And I say this because at a teleconference on Monday, the H2020, I don't know if that speaks to anyone here, that's the funding program in Europe, now requires a 30-page ethiks regulatory package to be filled in by European researchers. That's not ethics research, it's an ethics regulatory package. So you're thinking, what has happened that it's become like tax law, that how do we keep it dynamic and alive? How do we keep it adaptive, flexible, inclusive, and responsive? Well, maybe all the tools are there. We just need to have a picture of the whole regulatory system and add to that an additional ingredient that'll sort of wake people up, and that is a human rights approach. I think that the 40-year trajectory that I have described to you, this is my favorite slide. This is a cartographer in Montreal. He hasn't got this is 2005 to 2009. That's data sharing. You don't even see Canada. I don't think it's all snow up there or something. But look at 2009 to 2014. Those are maps of scientific collaborations. So no matter what is going on legally, I think they're voting with their feet, as we say. They are actually sharing data, and that's the best and my favorite slide to illustrate that this is possible. So maybe the time has come to activate what hitherto has been or have been dormant human rights. The right to benefit from science and its advances, the right to health, the rights of the child. What about the rights of future generations? 1997, I went to look it up. What has happened with it? It's been used a little in the environment. Is this what we need in the CRISPR debate to wake up this right? All of these human rights are already enshrined in signed and ratified treaties and covenants. 169 on the right to science. This makes them legally actionable. So individuals and groups around the world can ask their governments, what are you doing to activate these rights for the common good? And I think it's this unexplored potential of human rights that holds the most promise, rather than the ever-enduring prohibition reflex. It could be the most innovative catalyst for moving what are really global issues to the stage where they belong, that of human rights. Reframing the challenges and filtering answers through such a human rights approach means we have to do one thing. We have to reorient our conversation to governing society and shift our focus from avoiding risks to protecting opportunities. Then maybe we could speak of an anticipatory reflex that guides us in making choices about how we regulate science with the needs of future generations in mind. Thank you.